Greetings once again to another book review. I'm Yuri Brito, pastor of Providence Church in Pensacola, Florida. Anyone familiar with the ministry we have at Providence Church knows that we place quite a great deal of significance in the training of our children, a great deal of significance on the idea and biblical concept of the covenant. The covenant is God's way of dealing with His faithful people. And this is not just a dealing with fathers and mothers, but also biblically a covenant is how God deals with fathers and mothers and their children. And since this is the case, and because we treat this idea as such a significant part of who we are, we also believe that there's a great responsibility placed on parents in how they train their children, the paideia, in the nurture of God. And in our estimation, in our idea, there is really nothing as crucial to our children's growth and maturity as their participation in worship. Worship is at the very center of this training. And this is why, as a pastor, I'm always looking for these types of books that stir parents to bring their children and include their children in this great celebration that we call worship. And in my study, I came across this book entitled Parenting in the Pew by Robbie Castleman. And Castleman observes that the reason so many parents dismiss the significant part of training their children is because many of the parents in their generation, they also did not receive this education. And so parents need to be re-educated in order to educate their own children to celebrate God in the pew, as the author would state. We have not been trained to view worship as the very genesis of our children's education, when it is the very genesis, the very center of their educational process. The author is the wife of a Presbyterian minister. She has really committed much of her life to training other parents to include their children in worship as opposed to excluding them, which in her estimation, my estimation also, is the easy way out, is the easier route to take. I remember, in fact, speaking to an elderly woman in a congregation I served many years ago about the joy I had in seeing little children as part of the worship service and hearing their sounds throughout the liturgy, throughout the service. Her response, of course, was a response I've heard many times, even from many adults, that children are a distraction. They distract her from concentrating on certain elements of the worship service. And, of course, this is a common reaction in our modern evangelical circles, but the reality is that children need to be a part of worship because that's where they belong. They belong in the midst of the assembly. They belong as an active and as an inclusive part of the worship of God's people. As adults are trained in their way through the liturgy, so are children also trained to grow up and to mature. And as opposed to sending them away, which by necessity ends up dividing the body, ends up dividing the household of God, as opposed to sending them away, we are called biblically, and as the author states again and again, to bring them together, to include them in this great celebration of bringing worship and bringing exaltation and adoration to the Father, Son, and to the Spirit. The book is truly filled with great applications of how parents are to accomplish this task. The author offers great advice on how to train children to pray, to listen, to sing, to gather with the assembly, and a host of other wonderful advice. Specifically, she spends a whole chapter dealing with how to prepare our children for worship, and that the preparation really begins on Saturday night for the Sunday morning. A very important chapter, one that I've stressed again and again in my own ministry at Providence Church. There were a few parts of the book that I found seriously weak. In one sense, she does want to stress the inclusive nature of worship, that children are to be a part of it, but she spends a significant amount of time in the book excluding children from the Lord's table. And that I found quite troubling, but that is just one of one element that I disagreed in the book, but that doesn't take away from the other very positive elements that was stressed in the book. There are a lot of things, of course, that I would add to the discussion, but in a day and age when books like these are so rare, I commend this book, Parenting in the Pew, as I commend it for tackling an issue that has been undealt with throughout the years in evangelical worship. If worship is, in our estimation, indeed the heart of the Christian life, then it seems that we as pastors need to begin educating our parishioners in the joy of including our children as opposed to excluding them, including them into this great and cosmic celebration that we experience as a people every Sunday morning. And as we receive the gifts of God and the liturgy He has for us, it is important that our children are also present in receiving these gifts together with us. Again, the book is Parenting the Pew by Robbie Castleman, Guiding Your Children into the Joy of Worship, one of many books I would recommend on the topic. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. The Lord be with you.